This is Hallicrafters Rehabs. Welcome back. So we're at the point now where I need to do some testing and make sure that my wiring is correct. And I've already found plenty of mistakes, like wiring the input to the on-off switch to ground. Fix that one. But we're going to put in the IF transformers. There's one of them right there. And then we're gonna do some ohm testing and of the DC resistance testing of everything I can even before I put those in. Now I'm showing you here a ceramic capacitor that I harvested off the set and then broke the lead. I've decided to put these. This is coming from the parts receiver. And I've decided to put this into the first true IF amplifier. That's a 6SG7 after the mixer. And it's the only ceramic capacitor in the whole set. But it might have help with drift. So we'll see. And it goes right in there on the 6SG7. But first we got to do some measurements and other things of that sort. And I'll come back. So I've got the schematic out and I've got the table of DC resistances. And so we're going to double check everything all that we can before we put in those IF transformers. There will be some blank spaces in the area, but we can see whether there's any mistakes, and I'll be marking on the schematic each intersection as you go through, and then measuring the DC resistance. So that's the plan. We'll see how that happens. I hope you don't mind the fact that I had the voiceover because I forgot to turn on the microphone for the whole video. So I've done as many measurements as I can and checked everything I can on the schematic until the IF transformers are put in. And the measurements don't show any DC resistance anomalies up to now, and I emphasize up to now. So this is as much work as we can do on this side. There is a problem. First, we'll shake this out. It's the first time of many times we'll be doing that. And we turn this over and yuck, what a mess. Fingerprints and everywhere. And so the plan is we're going to go in and probably take a light detergent and maybe a paper towel, slightly wet with a little bit of soap, and see if we can remove that grime from my dirty fingers. You have to lift this thing up to put all those screws in and things, and that's what happened. So let's see. Well, here we are. Obviously, the cleaning of the surface didn't work. In fact, it just went downhill from there. So another coat of paint, and this time I let it dry for a couple hours, and then I put a coat of clear matte sealant on top of it, and that has made for a much harder, tougher surface. And I'm just not a paint. This is my weak point, is painting these things. I'm not a chemist, and I should have put a top coat on, a clear top coat on originally, and it just didn't occur to me. but I have the experience now, and this has turned out very nice. So now I'm putting in the T1 into the set. That's next to the mixer. And as planned, all of the leads are in place, and each one, there's no components attached to directly to the IF transformer, which is really important because then you can quickly remove or put in and solder with the least amount of damage, possible damage, I should say, installing or making the solder connections. So I even have a standoff where components are attached to right here for the B plus, and rather than do it the other way. So now moving on to the T2. These things are pretty simple to install. You just simply take the transformer and it inserts into the slot, and there's a clip that comes around, and you just push that clip in far enough. You want that real tight against the chassis, and it snaps into place. So that's T2, and I'll be attaching that as well. There we go. There comes the clip, and it just snaps in. You sometimes have to use a push screwdriver or pair of pliers to get it to snap snugly. So continuing on then. All right, now we have to do the final connections to the IF transformers. Then we'll go through and check against the schematic and after a sip of coffee. The connections, as well as ohm out all of the connections that couldn't be done before when the IF transformers were not in place. And this is IF 3 that's being installed here. So then after installing, I did the ohming out and the testing, and sure enough, there was an open lead on T1, the worst one. In fact, it seems like it was there was corrosion actually that was preventing a good contact. It seems like I had this problem on the original set that I restored, but I wasn't able to figure that out with that, so I might be able to make that one work someday. At any rate, this has been corrected, and now it's testing matters. It would have been an open connection. Okay, so one of the things is I've gone ahead and installed the power cord as well. You don't see it here, but it's in place behind on the upper left-hand corner. And we're just reinstalling now the T1 transformer. One connection at a time. We're going to solder it carefully and delicately because we've had trouble with this one. And then we're going to test after each solder, or at least on that winding for sure. And it's not surprising that there was corrosion right at the junction between the lead from inside the transformer and the little clip that comes out, or the lug that comes out, because that's the one where they wrap all of those big heavy 1 watt resistors and everything else around directly around the clip, the solder lug, and dump gobs of solder and rosin on top of that. And I'm sure there were times when they had problems getting a receiver to test out properly. Occasionally that would happen to them right on the assembly line. At any rate, this tests out fine, and I get the appropriate test both for the screen and the plate. So then we can come through. The rest of them were pretty straightforward, and we didn't have any problems with that one. So now, with the mic turned on, maybe you prefer the mic turned off, we'll go through and summarize the work then. On T1, pin 1 goes to the crystal phasing. This is a tap which goes to the switch. Then we have pin 2 which goes to the trimmer for the crystal. Then there's a tap which goes to ground, and we can trim that, both of those actually. I don't like stick. Okay. Then pin 3 goes to the 330 ohm resistor, which connects to the plate of the mixer. And pin 4 is the B+. There's a B+ to this standoff, which is doing nothing but providing some place other than the transformer itself to do these connections for this 10,000 ohm resistor between the screen and the B+. And then there's a filter capacitor here. Then so that's T1. We'll move over to moving to T2. Pin 1 goes to the grid to the 6SK7. Pin 2 is the AVC, and this resistor was a 1 mega ohm resistor to the grid of the RF amplifier. And testing matters because I had a 15 ohm resistor instead of a 1 mega ohm resistor. A matter of transposing the green and the black. They look pretty close. If you compare the two, you could, yeah, that looks like a mega. Well, it's not a mega ohm, so it's 15 ohms. It happens. Okay. Then pin 3, it goes to the plate of the first true IF amplifier. And then pin 4 is the through the meter, and the meter adjust and everything is the B+ with a filter capacitor into the IF transformer. And moving over, was I doing that? Yeah, I was out of camera shot. Lovely. Okay, so those 4 pins were right over in here. Okay, you couldn't see them anyway. I was actually pointing out over here, but the camera was there and it looked like it was the same. This is my version of close-up. Okay, no cinematography, Oscars. All right, and then on the T3, and I hate those little strings because those strings can cause shorts and everything else. There we go. Clip. There went the lug and the wire. No, April Fool. This could be no April Fool if I messed that up. Okay, so pin 1 is right here, and that's going to, that's the signal to the detector. Pin 2 is goes to the AVC. Pin 3 goes through this wire to the plate, the 6SK7 second IF amplifier. Let's move that a little bit. And then pin 4 is the B+. And again, I used a standoff to do all these connections here instead of on top of that. Very delicate lug on the IF transformer. Also, I don't think I mentioned that this, I have the rectified power supply. Let's go ahead and back this out now. I have the rectified power supply right here that will give me power to the surface mounted PC board on the mixer that will give me a buffer that goes to the connector, which will go to the frequency counter, but we'll worry about that after we've even done our startup testing. We got to make sure the receiver works on its own before we start worrying about digital frequency. The power cord is in, goes through the fuse, and then comes actually to a switch. Let's see where it's. Yeah, that goes to the switch, and then the switch comes back to this inrush current limiter. That's what I had grounded because I just wasn't even looking there. But anyway, inrush current, fix that. Then inrush current limiter to the transformer. This will help preserve or keep the, actually it lowers the voltage too. It lowers the voltage from 120 to about 118.3, which is a little closer to what the design was a 115, as if that mattered. It really doesn't. Let's put this back down. Okay. That was where I connected in the rectified. It's actually rectified over from the tube filament circuit. The 6.3 volts goes through this little Schottky diode and a 2250 volt microfarad electrolytic, and gives a almost gives a DC 6+ volts for little printed circuit boards. This is the ground for the center tap on the high voltage leads AC circuit on the rectifier, and then this is neutral, the return from the primary on the main transformer. With that, and the fact that everything ohmed out properly after all this, including my mistakes were found, hopefully all of them, we are finished electronically with the bottom. It's a milestone. Now we can start installing on the top. And I have been soaking the, let's stop right here. We'll have to set this up at the new location. So I have been soaking the main tuning capacitor in a half a squeeze or a half a lemon juice. This looks like about a gallon of water. I guess I can get the lemon jumped off of it. And so a sprinkle of TSP, trisodium phosphate. And so we're going to just rinse this off and dry it out and cover it with some Bow Shield T9. So that's the next step. Once again, here I am. I forgot to turn the mic on. It's getting to be a really bad habit. Anyway, I've set all this stuff up. I have taken and worked on the main tuning and the band spread. I actually cleaned them with Brasso first, and then followed with T9, and then I went ahead and painted the ends that were badly, they're just plain cheap steel, and they were corroded and so forth, and it looks a whole lot nicer. Then these are ready to go in, which will handle the dial cords. So, and I've oiled them as well, and I use a radio control modeler's oil and grease for these components. And so I did go through and put a little bit of nice looking silver paint on the top side of these as well. So it's all ready to put everything on top. Hopefully this is the last time I have it. So I'm putting in the standby receive switch. This has been gone over with triple, quadruple aught steel wool, and then I went over it with some Brasso, and also cleaned it out with a little deoxit, and it works. I don't know where my, there it is. Just to test it, it goes into here. So when I did the deoxit, it was really hard. All you could do is kind of hope it would get in between this cover and that base. And on. So we're actually receive, standby. Receive, standby. So it's working good. I didn't expect it to have any problems because, like I say, it was probably stored in somebody's attic for a long time. These are the leads that come into the standby receive switch. Don't forget to put this through first. Right. We're going to solder. We need to 10 for that. Doesn't matter which goes where. this around, find the solder. Okay, we'll do the other one. We'll just go over this one again. Oh, that's okay. And then we're going to trim it. Okay. This has knurls in it, or whatever you want to call that. That was. I'm going to bend that back. They go in like that, maybe, perhaps. Or do they go in like this? Maybe it goes in that way. All right, so just sort of sneak this in behind my relocated audio transformer, and that's where it belongs. Let's see if we can get that wire down there. There we go. And I have to find the nut and tie it in, but that's now the standby receive switch. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is take these ribbon copper grounding strips off and put in something easier to work with. Solder wick. It's just tacking the outside with solder. I could use the board. This is just solid powder, which is very easy. No, it's not. Yeah, just cut it off with solder. Yeah, that's it. That's good connection. I think it's what I do. Just give me your day. That's like doing this. Here, that's good. Keep it. Some real solder. Solder things. I got this. Oh, that's solder to touch it. Which is wait. So like this. Alright, and we'll go through and remove all this ribbon in the back and do the same thing. That's the only other place. Now, I left a little stub there from the old copper. Made a nice attachment point. These main tuning capacitors for the SX-99 have this little extending arm, and they're mounted on a grommet, which is rotten by this time. It's a rubber grommet. It's not intended to insulate, it's intended to, I guess, to cushion against perhaps microphoning or whatever. I'm not sure what the electronic reason for it is. but it doesn't have to be insulated. I'm always looking for options on washers. You can get these at Harbor Tools. It gives me nothing for saying that. And I order from I don't know where, grommets from every place. But a really good one is just this little, it's actually a faucet washer. And there's a little metal tube that goes around the screw that goes through, so that pushed through rather nicely, and I just put a small grommet on the top, and I've made up now a replacement which will work just fine. But you can see how rotten that is. It just doesn't, it's not. But you have to hang on to these, because these little gems are actually, if anything, they're the same as on a PC board when you're trying to connect the top and the bottom through holes. So they do provide, I guess, an electrical connection between the chassis and the base of the main tuning condenser. Anyway, that's the plan. And then the next thing we got to do is we got to connect from here to here, because let's see, it goes like that. Right. It's all done on the underside, so you have to make that connection before you mount anything inside the chassis. We're ready to mount this main tuning capacitor, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put in this bracket that holds in the back side of the main tuning capacitor. I had it available grommet because the one they have, of course, is no good. So we'll do that first. I believe that's the wrong size screw. We're going to have to do a screw in that, so that'll take some time. Okay, well, we made it to the hard part. The shorter this length is, the more difficult it is to do this. So I'm not very good at doing it real short, and I'm not going to try. This is the oscillator section, and we'll solder that first. And we're going to have to bring a soldering iron over here for this to work. Didn't think of that. Okay, well, the camera lost the soldering. That's no big deal. However, I did have to have the leads as long enough so that I could flip it over like this. And it's a kind of tricky evolution. I've got the grommets in here. There's a special long sheet metal screw that has to be used to anchor this down, and then you bring this over, and when you put this in its place, this shield actually marries up very close to this where the two can be soldered together. So we're going to just do some continuity checks. Out of experience, I've known that you need to do that. So, yeah, but it's not grounded. So let's see, is the ground to ground? Yes, okay. How about this one to this one? Right, but not to that. Okay, and then this one all the way out to here. Yeah. And here. Okay, so I've had trouble with that. I've had trouble with everything putting these back in. So we've still got to do these additional, I would say, RF grounds in here. And I need to grind out this little painted over solder puddle for this one ground. And then we'll solder that and this will be in. So, making progress. Let's take a tour of the main tuning condenser. I decided to switch those out with brass screws for the highly technical reason of they look better. And they also fit nicely for the main tuning capacitor. So, let me get over here. So here's a grounding connection right here, and then another one to the back of this bracket. I put in the antenna compensator, and so it comes in over here. Unfortunately, I don't have the skills of Hallicrafters, so the lead length from the coils to the main tuning capacitor is longer than theirs. And there's where I soldered into the chassis. Then there's one right here, one right here, and one right here. This extension has a function, and that's actually a tension adjust. Now the tension is probably tighter than I would like it, but it'll be fine. But the more you do this way, the less tension there is. Rather interesting. I have no idea why they did that, but that's the intent. Well, it looks like we're ready to put those last two pieces onto the chassis. However, oh, look at all these scratches. What happened? Oh no. Oh, we call this an interference. Yes, indeedy. I didn't want to rework that audio transformer, and the Dremels are quite convenient, but that'll fit in there nicely now. And no harm, much, no foul. Need to paint this up a little bit before I put it in. Okay, we're going to go and mount these brackets. Let's get the light around in the right place. They really go in quite easy from the top, and there's no nut on the bottom side. There's a black washer that goes in first. And there's a lot of slop for adjustment, which will be needed when we do the stringing to line up as best we can. In fact, I probably ought to not even tighten it, but I will. Ah yes, metallic. guess what? It needs a nut. I was thinking it didn't. Funny me. Alright, so we have to do it this way. I found some nuts that will work properly. They're actually metric nuts, but they have the right color. So get this up. I have to stand it up. Find it from this side. It's easier to do this without the switch in place. Definitely. The other one will add that option. Get my big fat stubby fingers inside there. There we go. And basically, this is the easy one, but that's the way all of these will be done this way. There is a lot of slop with the washer that will permit adjustment, which we'll need to do to line up the strings. So, we'll come back after a few hours of frustration. Well, it won't be that bad. Okay, interference resolved. Everything at this point is put in, and now we can put spring the dial, which I'll do in the next video. In the meantime, that's actually in pretty good shape. I think all this is going to need in the silvered area. I don't know if you can see this. Put it here. So that's in good shape. I just need to just clean it and wash it. Now this is going to be painted, and I've done these before, so no big deal, but we'll be spending much of the leisure time this afternoon washing and cleaning. This is Hallicrafters Rehabs, and thanks for watching. And I have one more thing I want to talk about. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is good of good repute, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things. Remember, be a misogynist. Being aware